First met Alfredo, I think it was 1961. I had come to work in Rome as an agent, representing actors and writers and directors. Alfredo had been to the United States and he received a Fulbright scholarship. And he studied at I think it was the University of Wisconsin. And I met him when he returned from the United States. He got a job at the American Embassy working in the press department. And he also had friends who were publicists and journalists who were working in the film industry. And he left the American Embassy very early on and got a job working for Dino De Laurentiis, the biggest producer in Italy at that time. Our friendship was almost immediate. There was something about both of us that we responded to. We didn't work together at the beginning. We met through mutual friends. I liked Alfredo because he was very intelligent. He understood the United States, having gone to university there. And he wanted to be involved in the film industry in Italy rather than work as a journalist or as a publicist. And so that was our mutual connection at the beginning. Our friendship grew out of that. We would go to dinner 4 or 5 nights a week, different restaurants around Rome with other journalists, with publicists. So it became a little group of 6 or 7 people spending the evenings together, eating, drinking, then going to the Piazza del Popolo, where you would sit for hours talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, films, art, music, everything. So our interests were wide ranging, and we shared that. In 1961, it was only 9 or 10 years after the end of World War II. Of course, Italy had a fascist leader, and the politics during World War II were people embraced fascism. And so it was very interesting in the early 60s. Nobody was a fascist then in the early 60s. Everybody joined the Communist Party in a way to disassociate themselves with fascism. Whether they believed in communism or not, they embraced it because it was a way to justify their transition. So it was a very, very interesting period, and Alfredo and I would talk about that and what attracted people to fascism, what attracted people to communism, etc. And it was also in a way, an explosion of the arts in Italy. People immersed themselves in the film industry. You had the greatest collection of filmmakers in the world working in Italy, whether it was Fellini or Visconti or Pietro Germi. It was an exciting period for the arts, whether it was painting or sculpting or cinema or television or literature. It was a flowering period for Italy, and Alfredo and I embraced that. We shared the very intense, 3 years in Rome. We traveled together. We went to the festivals together at Cannes and various other places. We traveled to the south of France. I had friends who had a house there. We stayed there for 3 or 4 weeks. So we had all of these things in common. A love of the arts, a love of music, painting, and we explored these things together for the short period that we actually lived in the same city. Alfredo made some contacts with some of the producers, and I introduced him to various people in the film industry as well. And so in a way it was expedient because he worked with two directors that specialized in horror movies. Very successful, George Romero and Dario Argento. So Alfredo was drawn in a way, rather than being a great fan of horror movies, he wanted to find filmmakers that he respected and was interested in, and they happened to work in the horror movie genre. Horror movies were popular in Italy, very respected and good directors who specialized in that kind of filmmaking. So it was a genre that was accepted and respected.
I do not know what price I shall have to pay for breaking what we alchemists call silentium.
He was more interested in Argento and Romero because they had international audiences, both in the United States and in Europe. And so he knew that by working with those filmmakers, it would lead him and open the doors in the United States as well. So when I left the agency business to become a producer myself and worked for 20th Century Fox, I was able to help Alfredo, for example, with Inferno and Suspiria. Fox distributed those films for Alfredo and the filmmakers. As Alfredo grew older and using his experience from having studied in the United States, he grew as a person as well, and his interests broadened. He became a great art collector, a unique person. And I think that was one of the things that attracted me to Alfredo, that he had this broad vision of the arts, all of the arts. Alfredo was always a person who cared about people and a curiosity, whether you were rich or poor, famous or anonymous. If you were interesting, Alfredo was interested. And what he saw was that he had made enough money producing, selling films. He bought films from the American companies and sold them to Rai Television. And he made a lot of money from that. But he wasn't a person who was interested only in money, only in success. And I think what he discovered traveling through the world was the extent of poverty in the world. India, his visit that he and Elena took, the trip to India, opened their eyes really to the need of people like Alfredo and Elena who could contribute something to help alleviate poverty, that could benefit young people in terms of education. And so he made a transition. He wanted to broaden his own life, becoming a philanthropist and setting up the foundation. It gave him a sense of fulfillment. went to countries that nowadays you couldn't get in. And I think in that traveling, what he did was he encountered the most extreme poverty as well as the richness of the arts. As a photographer, I was astounded how good a photographer Alfredo was, and the range of his interest. When you look through the books, whether they're in Africa or India, it's people, it's faces, and what they represented to him. It was a very interesting journey for him. Through the travels, I think, encountering so much poverty as well as the beauty of the countries, this contradiction in a way that led him into the foundation and benefiting children and helping other people. Art photography grew over a period of time. Looking at the great photographers, I think that opened his eyes in terms of what he could actually contribute as a photographer. People in their places of work, of where they lived, how they lived, what their faces were, what did the faces represent to him. Through that, I think his affinity with meeting these people and realizing that he could make a contribution to help these people was something that motivated him very strongly, and I think was really the basis for the foundation. And not just to give money, because that's what philanthropy normally is. You give money, money is spent, but Alfredo wanted to be able to influence how the money was spent, how it was used. So he was an active participant. He and Elena both were active in terms of what the school was, the schools that they established, what were they teaching? How were they reaching the students? What was the relationship between the schools and the church and these needy children? He grew into that person that he ended up to be. It's interesting to see people that they have one life, and their life is their work and making money, and then to see them grow as people, to expand their horizons in terms of what life has to offer. And Alfredo had this great curiosity about people and places, and he was on a journey of discovery.